What's going on, people? Welcome back to this episode of Off the Pitch Talks, where we're going to be talking about the aftermath of relegation for relegated clubs from the Premier League. At the start of every Premier League season, 20 clubs own a share of the Premier League, giving them equal voting rights on governance matters within the league. The three relegated Premier League clubs exchange a Premier League share certificate with the EFL for one of the EFL's 72 share certificates, and vice versa with the clubs that are promoted from the EFL Championship to the Premier League. The Premier League's annual general meeting, AGM, is normally in the first week of June that finalises the exchange between promoted and relegated clubs between the Premier League and the EFL. The relegated clubs will then get a call from a member of the EFL executive team to discuss familiarisation around regulations, sponsorship, operations, as they have they play more games in the EFL Championship than they do in the Premier League. So 46 game season compared to a 38 games in the Premier League. So they just call them, they give them a call to iron out these issues, to refamiliarise them back into the EFL. Obviously, with the teams that are about to get relegated this season, with Ipswich, Southampton and Leicester, these three clubs were promoted last season, so it shouldn't really be that much of a big issue. Compared to someone like Everton or Wolves was to be relegated. We then come on to parachute payments, which is what the EFL CEO Rick Parry hates and is campaigning to get rid of. Parachute payments are a form of payment that are given to the clubs that have just been relegated from the Premier League as a way for them to reacclimatise financially to life for them back in the EFL, as they do not get the same lucrative broadcasting rights they get in the Premier League as they do in the EFL. If I'm not mistaken, I think the EFL's broadcasting right is almost like a fourth or fifth of what the minimum, the last place Premier League club earns in one season from broadcasting. Parachute payments are paid out over 3 years, with the first year the relegated clubs receiving 55% of what they've earned in broadcasting rights had they still been in the Premier League, 45% if they're still in the Championship within the second year, and 20% if they're still within the Championship within the third year. As I said, they act more like a safety net for clubs to stop them from going out of business, as obviously they're going to likely to have a high wage bill from playing in the Premier League with the broadcasting revenue they'd receive, but compared to what they get in the Championship, it basically stops them more or less as a safety net from going out of business, helps them to reacclimatise, say with staff cuts and whatnot. The commercial hit of relegation can cost the club up to £100 million in terms of lost revenue from broadcasting income, sponsorships, gate receipts. Obviously, when a club gets relegated, they're more than likely for crowds to go down, and also they're going to have to lower their ticket prices, as there's obviously more games being played in the EFL, so they could still make it up that way from lowering the ticket prices, obviously with more games being played over the 46 game season. But the commercial hit can be big, depending obviously on the size of club and how established they've been previously in the Premier League. If it's after one season of being in the Premier League, say like Luton Town, the commercial hit could be massive, adding to the income they'd have received from overseas international broadcasting rights. My view is there should be a financial fair play leeway for promoted clubs and relegated clubs, as the difference between allowable losses between the two divisions, the Premier League and the EFL Championship, is massive. The Premier League allows clubs to make losses of £105 million, allowable losses over a rolling 3 year period, where the EFL only allows its clubs to make allowable losses of £39 million for the same period. I think promoted clubs that haven't been in the Premier League for over 20 years should be exempt from financial fair play, like Nottingham Forest, as we saw they were hit with a financial fair play penalty last year, points deduction last year, because they'd spent over £150 million on signing players to build a competitive Premier League squad. And as we saw in their argument when they went to court, they argued that the other promoted clubs, Bournemouth and Fulham, had the luxury of parachute payments, as they'd recently been relegated from the Premier League, but Forest hadn't been in the Premier League for over 20 years, and therefore were just spent £100 million to build a competitive squad, but therefore were hit with a financial fair play points deduction penalty. Let me know your thoughts on all of this, and let me know any topics you want me to talk about further. Thank you for listening, and peace out.